Welcome to the newest video, VMware vCloud Automation Center version 5.2 Prerequisites and Installation. Before we start, we need to connect to our vCAC server. We are going to leverage an admin account to log into the server, and then we are going to go step by step through the prerequisites, which you should validate before you start your installation. First, start the VMware utility to validate the Windows version of the Windows server. It should be Windows 2008 R2 Service Pack 1 as the bare minimum. Next, we are going to validate that the .NET framework in version 4.5 is correctly installed. We are now going to open the Server Manager to validate certain settings. First of all, you should validate that you have the correct full computer name as well as the domain name set in your system to ensure that later on authentication rules and stuff like that will perfectly work in vCAC. If your system is not yet within the Active Directory domain, be sure to actually add it to the domain before you continue. Next, unfold the roles item and unfold the IIS settings, and then the next step is to click onto the IIS Manager item. Next, we need to validate that certain services and features are installed within the IIS service. So these are in particular static content, HTTP redirection, ASP.NET, .NET extensibility, ASP, server-side includes, as well as Windows authentication, static content compression, dynamic content compression, and the IIS 6 management compatibility area. Next, we are going to configure the IIS Manager. Unfold the vCAC node within the IIS Manager. Unfold sites. Click onto default website. Authentication. Within the authentication, ensure that the anonymous authentication is disabled and the Windows authentication is enabled. Next, we need to do some changes to the providers due to a fix in Microsoft. Remove the negotiate parameter and then actually add it again to the system. This is necessary due to a known bug in the Windows IIS service. Click OK to leave the setting. Next, we will go back to the server settings. Until we leave the server roles, we are going to validate the features installed on our Windows Server 2008. It's important that you have the Windows Process Activation Service installed, including Process Model, .NET environment, and configuration APIs. Also validate that the .NET 3.51 features, including WCF activation, HTTP activation, and non-HTTP activation, is installed. Next, unfold the configuration segment in the left-hand menu. In this case, we are going to deactivate the firewall. Normally, you would set appropriate rules. So, go to Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. Actually, click onto Windows Firewall Properties and set all individual properties on the firewall segments for the domain profile, the private profile, and the public profile to off before you continue. Again, in a real-life scenario, you would just set the appropriate firewall roles, which are basically port 1433 and port 433. Next, click onto Services, scroll down in the Services pane to the secondary login service and validate that this service is started in your environment. Also validate that it is set to automatic. Close the Server Manager. Next, we need to validate certain DCOM settings within our environment. Therefore, click Start, Administrative Tools, or All Programs Administrative Tools. Select Component Services. Within Component Services, unfold the Component Services section, double-click on Computer, My Computer, and then click on Distributed Transaction Controller, which unfolds the local DTC, and then right-click on it and select Properties. Within this item, select the Security tab and validate that Allow Remote Client Network DTC Access is set, Allow Remote Clients is set, Allow Remote Administration is set, as well as Allow Inbound and Allow Outbound is set. We can close this window now. Next, click the Start menu, open the command prompt with Run as Administrator, confirm the user account control message, and next we are going to switch to c/Windows/Microsoft.NET/framework/version 4030319, and we need to register this against our IIS service. Therefore, we are going to call spnet_rec_iis.exe-i, which will run the install process. Once this install is completed, we need to restart the IIS by actually issuing an IIS reset command. In the next step, we are going to install the so-called vCAC or vCloud Automation Center Prerequisites Checker utility. We have, as a preparation, unfolded or installed all the install files on the local hard disk C install. That makes our life much easier. Within that, we have an installation folder, a setups folder, and a tools folder. Go to the tools folder, which contains a file called vCAC Prereq Checker. Confirm the UAC message, wait for the installer to launch, and then you are just a few clicks away from it. So once the installer has been launched, click the Next button. Accept the license agreement. Confirm that the install folder is correct. Hit install, and hopefully this one runs through completely. Then you click finish, and that will automatically launch the vCAC Prerequisites Checker for you. Once the Prerequisites Checker has been launched, just click Run Checker, and it will take a couple of seconds, but then you will get a complete list of all the prerequisites you have been going through and all the validation it has been done. The advantage of this tool is that it can actually fix certain scenarios or provide you with a step-by-step instruction on how to actually get around that specific case. Once the check is completed, we can actually validate for all the individual components of vCAC that all of the prerequisites are met. As you can see here, it shows you for each individual step whether the tools are installed, configured, whether the firewall is turned off, and all these individual settings which comply to your environment. In our specific case, we have the database server installed on a separate box, and therefore it cannot fully validate that the TCP/IP server has been set. However, as you can see here, it would provide you with full steps for finishing off that installation. Now that we continued our installation, we can move on and actually install the vCAC server itself. It consists of several steps again. Go to the Setup for Installation folder and right-click Run as Administrator on vCAC Server Setup. Confirm the user account control message by clicking yes, and wait for the install procedure to be launched. Once there, you are just a few clicks away from the actual install. Click Next on the welcome screen. Accept the license terms. Confirm the install folder. Be sure when you install it on a separate database server that you checkmark that the database components should be installed on your local system. Therefore, we are going to set this parameter to run locally. Click Next. Click Install. This will just take a couple of seconds. In this stage, we are only going to copy parameters and product information over to the system. Once you click Finish, we are going to launch the configuration wizard, which will guide you step by step through the actual implementation of vCAC. Once the configuration wizard has been launched, click Next. Enter your license numbers. We are not going to show that in this video. Click Next just to confirm the database configuration values. You have several options here. I would personally prefer that you just install the database instance on a separate SQL server, so you will need to enter the SQL Server database instance name, and then you can either choose between an existing empty database or whether you are going to leverage a new database and set the appropriate parameters. In our example, we are going to actually define the parameters for the database to be an empty database, but not a pre-existing one, and we are going to log into the database with the SA user. Next, you need to define the security passphrase. This is going to be used to encrypt content in your environment. This key should be stored carefully, and you should make sure that it is at least a strong passphrase. For the vCAC web server, you need to either have an existing certificate, or you can just create a new one by just clicking on the Generate Self-Signed Certificate. In a real-life environment, you would probably install an existing certificate. Once the certificate actually is generated, I would suggest that you also ensure that you tell the system to suppress any further certificate mismatch checkings. This is just in case, because we are acting with several agents, and if you don't have a proper certificate in place, this just makes sure that you can run your environment more appropriate. Click Next to continue. Next, we need to define a services account. In our case, this will be CSP Bootcamp /vCAC servers, which is our service account. And we just need to enter the passwords as well, just to make sure that it is properly set up. Be sure that this user has the logon as a service property set before you use it, otherwise you might run into several issues. For the authorization store, we are going to just leverage file-based. That's the easiest for our demo environment, but in reality you might want to leverage AD. Finally, we need to do some vCAC configurations, and in this case you define the main vCAC server name, you define the mail server parameters, so for all the ongoing email communications you need to use. Be sure that you put into the first column the name of the vCAC web server, second one is the SMTP server, and third one is finally the from address for all the emails being sent out by vCAC. Once that's completed, click Next. Finally, some model manager configuration. As we have mentioned previously in the whiteboard sessions, you can have multiple nodes. This is going to be the active one. And we are getting to a final stage. Just confirm the settings, and now the system is going to configure the environment, which is going to take between several seconds up to minutes, depending on the speed of your environment. Once all these individual steps are finally completed, we can actually confirm that the setup is correctly completed by just closing the configuration wizard. Next, we are going to open the Internet Explorer window, and within the Internet Explorer we are going to just access the URL of the web server we just created with vCAC installed. So the URL would be https://vcac dot our domain name /vcac. We will probably get a security warning for the certificate we created, because it was a self-signed certificate we used. But once we confirm that specific setting, we can actually go on to the vCAC main homepage. First of all, we need to enter a username and a password now. This must be a user from the admin group which was used to install vCAC. So in our case, we are going to leverage vCAC admin again, which was the user we used to log into the Windows box before we actually started the install process. We can see now that vCAC is actually up and running. You will see that in the topmost corner you will see 5 error messages or warning messages. First, that there is currently no DEM worker started, or in our case we haven't even installed it yet. Secondly, that we don't have an orchestrator started and enabled. And finally, the last 3 values are there to just confirm that you have an evaluation license. This concludes basically the Next, we are going to install the so-called Distribution Execution Manager, or short DEMs. For this, we are going to go back to the setups routine and call the DEM setup. Within the DEM setup, we need to actually click Next to get to the selection screen, confirm the license agreement, again click Next, and on the next screen we need to define what type we want to install. I personally prefer to first install the orchestrator, so that's why I'm going to call it DEM-org, and orchestrator as the description, and then set the appropriate radio button down here. Click Next. There is nothing to choose here. Click Next. Now you need to point it to the vCAC server. In our case, even though it's localhost, we want to make sure that all processes can access it. So we need to enter the fully qualified domain name of our vCAC server, the management service, the model manager web service, in our case that's both on the same box, and appropriate user account information which can be leveraged to log into the vCAC server. So again, this is going to be the services account. Click Next to move to the next screen. Now the changes are validated, and next screen you have the ability to actually define startup parameters for our DEM service itself. In our case, we are going to leverage the same services user account for both the vCAC server as well as the DEM services, but in theory you could actually leverage multiple different ones. So let's type again domain /username and the appropriate password for the appropriate DEM service, and hit Next, hit Install, and that's basically all you need to do to get the DEM orchestrator up and running. Once the setup is completed, just hit Finish. The only thing we just installed was the orchestrator, so we need to walk through this whole process once again for the actual DEM worker. The process is basically the same, so therefore we are going to shorten that video length a bit. In theory, again, the DEM worker could be set up completely separately, but in our case, as we are going to prepare for a proof of concept environment, we are going to basically install both basically the same way. The only difference you need to be aware of, and where you need to be a bit careful, is that you actually give it an individual name and that you set the radio buttons accordingly to the setup. Finally, we are going to relog into our Internet Explorer window and just validate that the DEM messages are gone. Once they are gone, we are pretty sure that the DEMs are actually continuing to collect data, and then we continue with our basic installation process, which we are going to continue in our next video. Thank you for watching this short video on vCAC version 5.2 basic installation and prerequisites. In the next couple of days, we are going to release another video on further configuration and basic procedures within vCAC. Thank you and goodbye.